That Christmas night, everyone was smiling, except her. While the family raised their glasses in celebration, Clara held the gift with trembling hands, sitting in the corner of the table, exactly where they always placed her. They thought it would be funny. They planned every detail of the humiliation, the veiled jokes, the harmless comment, the collective laughter. But what no one noticed was the weight of that gift. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't beautiful. It was dangerous, because inside there was no keepsake, no affection. There was something that could destroy that family forever. And when Clara stood up and placed the gift in the center of the table, the laughter died, silence fell, and Christmas transformed into a trial without defense. Clara Monteiro always knew she wasn't welcome. Since childhood, she learned that silence was the only way to survive in that house. Speaking too much was ingratitude. Questioning was disrespect. Existing was already a problem. Christmas, which should have been a refuge, became a stage. Every year the same dynamic. Compliments that didn't include her. Jokes that always hit her. Looks that said, "You don't belong." But that year, something changed. While the family organized the dinner at Aunt Helena's house, Clara arrived with a simple, discreet package, almost ignored. They thought they knew everything about her. They thought Clara would continue being the erased woman, grateful for any crumb of attention. What they didn't know was that gift wasn't a gesture, it was an answer, and that Christmas night, Clara would no longer ask permission to exist. Clara's earliest memory wasn't of love or warmth. It was of learning to make herself smaller. She was 7 years old, sitting at the Thanksgiving table in her grandmother's house. The adults were talking, laughing, their voices filling every corner of the room. Clara had tried to join the conversation, excited to share something she'd learned at school. But before she could finish her sentence, Uncle Robert had cut her off mid-word. "Adults are talking, Clara." The table went quiet for just a second. Then someone laughed, a light, dismissive sound, and the conversation resumed as if she'd never spoken. Her mother hadn't defended her. Her grandmother had simply looked away. And Clara had learned the first rule of survival in the Monteiro family: don't take up space. As she grew older, the lesson became more sophisticated. It wasn't just about staying quiet. It was about understanding the invisible hierarchy, the unspoken roles everyone played. Aunt Helena was the matriarch, the one whose opinion mattered most. Uncle Robert was the loudmouth, the one who could say anything and call it a joke. Her cousin Jennifer was the golden child, beautiful and successful, whose achievements were celebrated at every gathering. And Clara? Clara was the charity case. Her father had left when she was 3, disappeared without explanation, without goodbye. Her mother, overwhelmed and bitter, had leaned on the family for support. And the family had provided it, but never without a price. Every meal, every borrowed dress, every ride to school came with an invisible invoice, and Clara was expected to pay it with gratitude, with silence, with the erasure of her own needs. "We took you in when you had nothing," Aunt Helena would say, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "The least you could do is show some appreciation." Appreciation meant laughing at jokes that weren't funny. It meant accepting criticism disguised as concern. It meant sitting at the corner of the table, literally, during family dinners, as if her presence was an afterthought, tolerated but never truly welcomed. Christmas was the worst. Every December, the family gathered at Aunt Helena's sprawling colonial house, decorated with expensive ornaments and fresh pine garlands. The women would spend hours in the kitchen, preparing elaborate dishes. The men would drink bourbon and talk about business. The children, Jennifer's kids now, would tear through presents wrapped in coordinated paper, and Clara would sit in her designated corner, wearing whatever she could afford, carrying a modest gift she'd saved for months to buy, watching as everyone else celebrated a version of family that never included her. The microaggressions were constant, relentless. "Clara, you look healthy," Aunt Helena would say, her eyes scanning Clara's body with thinly veiled judgment. "Still working at that little bookstore?" Uncle Robert would ask, the word little doing all the work of dismissal. "It must be nice not having kids," Jennifer would sigh dramatically. "So much freedom." The implication clear: you're too broken, too poor, too unworthy to be a real adult. But this year felt different. Clara arrived at Aunt Helena's house on Christmas Eve with a knot in her stomach that hadn't been there in previous years. Maybe it was turning 38. Maybe it was the therapy she'd finally started 6 months ago. Maybe it was the simple, brutal realization that nothing would ever change unless she changed it. She parked her old Honda 2 blocks away. Closer spots were always reserved for family, and walked through the cold December air carrying her simple wrapped gift. The house was already loud with voices and laughter. Through the bay window, she could see Uncle Robert gesturing wildly with a drink in his hand. She could see Jennifer showing off something on her phone, probably photos from her latest vacation. Clara took a deep breath and walked inside. "Oh, Clara," Aunt Helena's voice was sugar-sweet poison. "We didn't think you'd make it." "I said I was coming," Clara replied quietly. "Well, you know how you are. Always so unpredictable." The first cut. Clara felt it, sharp and familiar, but she didn't react. She simply moved to her corner, placed her gift with the others and accepted the glass of cheap wine someone handed her, not the expensive bottle the family was drinking. The evening unfolded exactly as it always did. Dinner was served with elaborate presentation. Compliments flowed freely to everyone except Clara. When she offered to help in the kitchen, Aunt Helena waved her away. "You'll just be in the way, dear." But Clara noticed something else tonight, something she'd been too conditioned to see before. They were watching her. Uncle Robert kept glancing in her direction, then leaning toward his wife to whisper something. Jennifer's smile seemed sharper than usual, anticipatory. Even Aunt Helena's teenage grandson, Tyler, kept looking at Clara and snickering. They were planning something, and Clara realized with cold clarity, this year they hadn't just relegated her to the margins. They'd designed something specifically to humiliate her. Some joke, some performance, some public degradation, meant to remind her and everyone else it's of her place. She didn't know what it was yet, but she knew it was coming. And for the first time in her life, Clara wasn't afraid. She was ready. The gift exchange always happened after dessert, when everyone was loose with wine and warm with food. It was Aunt Helena's favorite part of Christmas, the ritual of watching everyone open presents, performing gratitude, playing their roles in the family theater. Clara sat in her corner, watching the preparations. The expensive gifts were piled under the 12-foot tree, wrapped in designer paper. Her modest contribution, a handmade candle set she'd spent weeks selecting, looked pathetic among them. "All right, everyone," Aunt Helena clapped her hands. "Time for presents." The room erupted in manufactured excitement. Jennifer's children squealed. Uncle Robert refreshed his bourbon, and Clara noticed the way certain family members were positioning themselves, their phones out, angles ready. They were going to record this. Whatever they had planned, they wanted evidence. They wanted to capture her humiliation, to replay it, to share it. The cruelty wasn't just in the moment, it was in the permanence. "Let's start with Clara," Aunt Helena announced, her voice bright with false enthusiasm. Clara's stomach dropped. They never started with her. She was always last, almost forgotten, an afterthought to be hurried through. "Oh, I can wait," Clara began. "Nonsense," Uncle Robert boomed. "We got you something special this year. Really put thought into it." Laughter rippled through the room. Not warm laughter, anticipatory laughter. Jennifer walked over carrying a large box wrapped in cheap garish paper, the kind you bought at dollar stores. She placed it in front of Clara with exaggerated care, then stepped back, phone camera pointed directly at Clara's face. "Open it!" someone shouted. "Yeah, Clara, we really think you'll love it," Tyler added, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Clara's hands were steady as she reached for the box. Her heart was pounding, but her face remained neutral. She'd learned long ago how to hide everything she felt. She tore the paper slowly, carefully. The room was silent except for the sound of ripping paper. She opened the box. Inside were clothes, but not new clothes. These were old, outdated pieces, someone's cast-offs. A stained blazer, a faded dress with a broken zipper, shoes that were clearly worn, probably from a thrift store. And sitting on top was a small card that read, "We thought you could use these. Love, the family." The room erupted in laughter. "I mean, you're always wearing the same thing," Jennifer said, barely containing her giggles. "We thought we'd help you diversify." "It's practical," Aunt Helena added, her voice defensive but her eyes gleaming with malice. "No sense in you spending money you don't have on new things when we have perfectly good items we don't need." "We're helping!" Uncle Robert roared with laughter. The cameras were all pointed at Clara. They wanted to see her break. They wanted tears or anger, or at minimum that familiar look of wounded acceptance she'd always shown before. But Clara didn't break. She looked at the clothes. Then she looked up at her family, really looked at them. At Aunt Helena's expensive jewelry and designer dress, at Jennifer's fresh manicure and luxury handbag, at Uncle Robert's Rolex. They'd spent money on this humiliation, not on a gift for her, but on the performance of charity, the theater of putting her in her place. "Thank you," Clara said quietly. Her voice was steady. The laughter faltered slightly. They'd expected more. "Well," Jennifer pressed, "aren't you going to try something on?" "Yeah, model it for us," Tyler chimed in. The room waited, hungry for her degradation. Clara folded the clothes carefully back into the box. "I'll save them for later," she said. "Oh, come on, Clara." Aunt Helena's voice had an edge now. "Don't be ungrateful. We went through a lot of effort." "I'm very grateful," Clara replied, and there was something in her voice, something new, something they couldn't quite identify, that made the room go quiet. "Well then," Aunt Helena said, recovering quickly. "Jennifer, why don't you open yours next?" The gift exchange continued, but something had shifted. The joke hadn't landed the way they'd wanted. Clara hadn't cried. She hadn't run. She'd simply absorbed it. And somehow that felt worse to them, though they couldn't articulate why. As Jennifer exclaimed over her expensive designer handbag, and Uncle Robert unwrapped his premium golf club set, Clara remained in her corner, the box of thrift store clothes at her feet. But her simple wrapped gift remained under the tree, untouched, waiting. And Clara knew that before the night was over she would place it on the table, because inside that gift wasn't an acceptance of their cruelty. It wasn't gratitude for the scraps they threw her. It was the truth they'd been hiding for 35 years. The truth about why her father really left. The truth about what they'd done to make sure Clara never knew. The truth that would destroy every lie this family had built their identity upon. But not yet. She would wait for exactly the right moment, and when that moment came, their laughter would turn to ashes in their mouths. Clara's investigation had started 6 months ago, though she hadn't known it would become an investigation at the time. It began with therapy, something Aunt Helena had once dismissed as self-indulgent nonsense for people who can't handle real life. Dr. Sarah Chen had asked Clara a simple question during their third session. "Tell me about your father," and Clara had realized she couldn't. She knew his name, Marcus Monteiro. She knew he'd left when she was 3. She knew her mother never spoke about him except in bitter fragments. "He abandoned us. He was selfish. We're better off without him." But the details, the why, the where, the how, nothing. "It's strange," Clara had told Dr. Chen. "I have no photos of him, no letters, no belongings. It's like he was erased." "Have you ever asked your family about him?" Clara had laughed bitterly. "Every time I brought him up as a child, I was told to stop living in the past. That some questions don't need answers. That I should be grateful for the family I have, not obsess over the one I lost." Dr. Chen had leaned forward. "Clara, that's not normal grief. That's enforced silence. There's a difference." The words had haunted Clara for days. Enforced silence. As if speaking about her father was dangerous. As if his memory itself was a threat. So she'd started digging. It began with small things. A Google search for her father's name yielded nothing. No social media, no obituaries, no news articles. It was as if Marcus Monteiro had never existed. Then she'd gone to the county clerk's office, searching for records. Birth certificate, present. Parents' marriage certificate, present. But when she'd asked for the divorce decree, the clerk had looked confused. "There's no divorce on file for these names." "But they separated," Clara had insisted. "In 1990, he left." The clerk had searched again. No divorce, no legal separation, nothing. Clara's hands had trembled as she'd walked out of that office. If her parents never divorced, what happened to her father? Where did he go? Why did everyone act like he'd simply vanished? She'd tried her mother next. A difficult conversation fraught with her mother's usual defensiveness. "Mom, did you and Dad actually divorce?" Her mother's face had gone pale, then red. "Why are you bringing this up?" "I just want to understand." "There's nothing to understand. He left. He didn't want us. End of story." "But there's no divorce record." "Clara." Her mother's voice had turned cold, a tone Clara knew meant the conversation was over. "Some things are better left alone. If you care about me at all, you'll stop digging into this." It wasn't concern in her mother's voice. It was fear. That's when Clara knew something was wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. She'd hired a private investigator next, a woman named Rebecca Torres who specialized in finding missing persons. It had cost Clara 3 months of savings, money she couldn't really afford to spend. But she'd needed answers. Rebecca had called her 4 weeks later. "Clara, I found something, but it's complicated. Can we meet?" They'd met at a coffee shop downtown. Rebecca had spread documents across the table, official papers, old photographs, newspaper clippings. "Your father didn't abandon you," Rebecca had said quietly. "He tried to get custody." The words had felt like a physical blow. What? In 1990, Marcus Monteiro filed for divorce and full custody of you. He claimed your mother was unfit, substance abuse, neglect. He had evidence, witness statements, medical records. Clara's mind had reeled. "But I don't remember any of this. You were 3. You wouldn't." Rebecca had pushed a photograph across the table. A young man, handsome, with Clara's same dark eyes, her father. "The custody case went to court, and that's where it gets strange." "Strange how?" "Your mother's entire family mobilized. They hired an expensive lawyer, far more expensive than they should have been able to afford. They brought character witnesses. They painted Marcus as unstable, dangerous even. And they won. They won. Not just won. Marcus was granted supervised visitation only. But according to these records," Rebecca had tapped another document, "he never got to exercise that visitation. There was a restraining order filed by your Aunt Helena claiming Marcus had threatened the family. After that, nothing. No attempts to contact, no further legal action. It's like he vanished." Clara had stared at the documents, her entire understanding of her life fracturing. Did he die?" "No." Rebecca had pulled out one final piece of paper. "I found him. He's alive. Living in Oregon. He's a carpenter, remarried, has 2 kids." The room had spun. Her father was alive. He had a family. A life. Without her. "Why didn't he keep trying?" Clara had whispered. Rebecca's expression had been sad, knowing. "I can't say for sure, but I found something else. A letter." She'd pushed an envelope across the table. It was returned to sender, unopened. "It's addressed to you from your father, sent to your mother's address in 1995. You would have been 8. Clara had opened the letter with shaking hands. "My dearest Clara, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I've tried so many times to reach you, but every letter is returned. Every call is blocked. Your mother's family has made it clear I'm not welcome in your life. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. I never wanted to leave. I fought for you. But they were too powerful, too connected, too willing to destroy me to keep you away. Helena threatened to destroy my career, my reputation, everything if I didn't disappear. She said it would be better for you if I was just gone. That fighting would only hurt you more. I was young and scared, and I believed her. I let you go. And I've regretted it every day since. If you ever find this, if you ever want to know the truth, I'm here. I'll always be here. Love, Dad." Clara had cried in that coffee shop, surrounded by strangers, as 35 years of lies crumbled around her. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He'd been stolen from her. By the same people who made her sit in the corner every Christmas, who humiliated her, who made her feel like she was nothing, like she deserved nothing, like she should be grateful for scraps. They'd taken her father, they'd taken her childhood, they'd taken every possibility of being whole, and they'd done it deliberately, systematically, cruelly. That's when Clara had decided. She would tell them she knew, but not in anger, not in confrontation, in the most devastating way possible, in front of everyone, on Christmas when they were all gathered together, performing their fake family unity. She would give them a gift, the gift of truth, and she would watch their world burn. The weeks following Clara's meeting with Rebecca Torres were the strangest of her life. She walked through her days carrying a secret that felt like a live wire beneath her skin. Electric, dangerous, impossible to ignore. She saw her family differently now. Every interaction was recontextualized, reframed by what she knew. When her mother called to confirm she was coming to Christmas dinner, Clara heard the anxiety beneath the casual tone. "You are coming, right?" Helena specifically asked. "I'll be there," Clara had said, and she'd heard her mother's small sigh of relief. Relief that Clara was still playing her role, still being manageable. When Aunt Helena texted her about bringing a dessert, "Nothing too fancy, dear, we know your budget is tight," Clara saw it for what it was. Another small cruelty, another reminder of Clara's manufactured poverty. Never mind that Aunt Helena's family had deliberately sabotaged Clara's father's ability to pay child support. Never mind that the tight budget was a consequence of their interference. Clara had almost confronted them immediately. The rage had been white-hot those first few days. She'd wanted to call Aunt Helena, to scream, to demand answers, but Dr. Chen had helped her see a different path. "What do you want from this?" Dr. Chen had asked during their emergency session. "I want them to hurt," like they hurt me. Okay, that's honest. But Clara, what would actually give you peace? Clara had been silent for a long moment. I want them to know that I know. I want them to understand what they took from me. And I want, what? I want them to live with it, the way I've had to live with this absence my entire life. Then choose your moment carefully, not in anger, in clarity. So Clara had waited, and in waiting, she'd discovered something powerful. Patience is its own form of control. She'd continued her research quietly, methodically. She'd found more letters from her father, all returned unopened. She'd found the court transcripts from the custody hearing. She'd found witness statements from people who'd clearly been coached by her family. She'd found financial records showing the expensive lawyer had been paid for by Uncle Robert's business account. The conspiracy wasn't just Aunt Helena, it was all of them. Her mother knew. Her grandmother, who died 5 years ago, had known. Uncle Robert had financed it. Even her cousin Jennifer, young as she'd been, probably knew something. They'd all chosen to protect themselves, their reputation, their comfortable lie, and they'd sacrificed Clara to do it. She'd also done something else in those weeks. She'd reached out to her father. The first email had been the hardest thing she'd ever written. Dear Marcus, you don't know me, but I'm your daughter, Clara. I'm 38 years old now. I recently found a letter you wrote to me when I was 8. I want you to know I never received it. I never received any of your letters. I'd like to talk if you're willing. He'd responded within an hour, just 2 words. Call me. Their first conversation had lasted 4 hours. She'd learned that he'd tried for years to reach her, that he'd saved every birthday card he'd written but couldn't send, that he'd driven to her high school graduation and watched from the parking lot, afraid to approach because of the restraining order, that he'd never stopped loving her, never stopped hoping that someday she'd find the truth. I thought about fighting it more, he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. But Helena made it clear that if I didn't disappear, she'd fabricate worse things, child abuse allegations, things that would destroy me, and your mother. She'd convinced herself it was better this way, that my chaos would hurt you. It wasn't chaos, Clara had said. It was love. I know that now. I didn't know how to make them see it then. They'd talked every week after that, getting to know each other, building something from nothing. And with every conversation, Clara felt a part of herself healing, the part that had always believed she was unlovable because even her own father had left. He hadn't left. He'd been forced out. But Clara hadn't told him about her plan, about the gift she was preparing. Because this wasn't his confrontation to have. This was hers. She'd spent 2 weeks deciding exactly what would go in that Christmas gift. It needed to be irrefutable. It needed to speak for itself. It needed to be impossible to dismiss or explain away. In the end, she'd chosen copies of the custody filing showing her father's attempt to keep her, the returned letters, all 15 of them, the financial records showing Uncle Robert's payment to the lawyer, the witness statements, with highlighted sections showing obvious coaching, a photograph of Clara with her father, taken just 2 weeks ago, both of them smiling, and a note, handwritten in Clara's careful script. The note was the most important part, because it wasn't angry. It wasn't accusatory. It was simply truthful. And the truth, Clara had learned, was more devastating than any rage could be. She'd wrapped it all in simple brown paper, tied with plain string, no bows, no decoration. It looked almost like garbage compared to the expensive gifts around it. But Clara knew its value wasn't in its appearance. It was in its contents. And as she sat in Aunt Helena's house on Christmas Eve, the box of thrift store clothes at her feet, her real gift still under the tree, Clara felt something she'd never felt before in this house. Power. Not the power that came from money or status or control over others. The power that came from knowing the truth and choosing exactly when and how to speak it. They thought they'd won tonight with their cruel joke. They thought they'd put her in her place once again. But the night wasn't over. And Clara's gift was still waiting. There's a particular weight to carrying a secret that can destroy people. Clara had felt it for weeks now, the gravitational pull of what she knew, bending every interaction, making everything heavier. But tonight, sitting in Aunt Helena's living room with the thrift store clothes at her feet and fake laughter still echoing around her, the weight felt different. It felt like potential energy, ready to be released. She watched her family continue their Christmas celebration, oblivious to what was coming. Jennifer was showing off her designer handbag, turning it this way and that for Aunt Helena's approval. Uncle Robert was pouring himself another bourbon, his face already flushed with alcohol and satisfaction. Tyler was scrolling through his phone, probably uploading the video of Clara's humiliation to social media. They were so comfortable in their cruelty. That's what the gift was really about, Clara realized. Not revenge, not punishment, but disruption of comfort. These people had built their entire identity on a foundation of lies. They'd told themselves they were good people, generous people, family people. They'd convinced themselves that taking in Clara and her mother was charity, not guilt, that their treatment of her was guidance, not abuse. The gift would crack that foundation. Clara had chosen the Christmas gift exchange deliberately. Not Christmas Eve when people were arriving and distracted. Not Christmas morning when children and chaos would dilute the moment. But this specific time, after dinner, after drinks, after they'd all performed their humiliation of her, when they felt most powerful, most secure, most untouchable, that's when Clara would place the gift on the table. She'd learned something important in therapy. Timing is everything. Dr. Chen had helped her understand that confrontation without strategy is just chaos. But confrontation with intention, that's transformation. You're not trying to change them, Dr. Chen had said. You're trying to change yourself, to stop carrying their shame, to stop accepting their narrative about who you are. The gift wasn't for them. It was for her. The brown paper wrapping was intentional. No disguise, no prettiness, just raw truth wrapped in the simplest covering. The string was twine she'd bought at the hardware store, the same kind her father used in his carpentry work. A connection, invisible to everyone but her. Inside, each document was placed in a specific order. She'd designed it like a story, a revelation that would unfold piece by piece. First, the photograph of Clara and Marcus, both smiling, the resemblance undeniable. That would be the shock. He's alive. She found him. Second, one of the returned letters, with the return to sender stamp visible. Evidence of blocked communication. Third, the custody filing, showing Marcus's attempts to keep his daughter. Evidence that he'd fought. Fourth, the financial records, Uncle Robert's check to the lawyer, evidence of conspiracy. Fifth, the witness statements with their coached language, evidence of manipulation. And finally, Clara's note, the interpretation, the meaning. The note had gone through 20 drafts. She'd written versions that screamed with rage, versions that dripped with sarcasm, versions that begged for explanation. But in the end, she'd settled on something simpler, something that couldn't be argued with because it wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. To the family who taught me that I wasn't wanted, I found my father. He's been alive this entire time. He never abandoned me. You took him from me. Every Christmas you made me feel like a burden. Like I should be grateful for scraps. Like I deserved to sit in the corner. Now I know why. You needed me to believe I was nothing so I wouldn't question what you'd done. It worked. For 35 years it worked. This is the last Christmas I'll spend believing your lies. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm not asking for explanations. I'm just letting you know. I know. Clara simple, direct, irrefutable. Clara looked at the wrapped gift under the tree. It sat slightly apart from the others, as if even the other presents were rejecting it. No one had asked about it. No one had shown any curiosity. They'd long ago stopped expecting anything interesting from Clara. That was their mistake. Aunt Helena stood up, slightly unsteady from wine. All right, everyone, let's finish the gift exchange. We've got a few more to go through. The family reassembled, gathering around the tree. Jennifer's children tore through their remaining gifts with practiced greed. Uncle Robert handed out envelopes, probably money for the adults. Nothing for Clara, of course. Clara remained in her corner, watching, waiting. Oh, Jennifer suddenly noticed. There's still one more gift here. Whose is this? She picked up Clara's brown paper package, turning it over with barely concealed disdain. That's mine, Clara said quietly. For everyone. The room paused. Aunt Helena's eyes narrowed. A group gift, Clara, you didn't have to. I wanted to, Clara interrupted, and there was something in her voice, a steadiness, a certainty, that made people stop talking. Jennifer held the package like it might be contaminated. Should I just open it? No, Clara said. She stood up, her legs steady despite her racing heart. I'll open it. She walked to the center of the room, to the coffee table where Aunt Helena's expensive decorations were arranged with mathematical precision. She took the package from Jennifer's hands, and then, with deliberate slowness, Clara placed the gift on the coffee table. Not gently, not respectfully. She placed it like a judge's gavel, like evidence in a trial, like a bomb ready to detonate. The room had gone completely quiet. Even Tyler had looked up from his phone. Clara began to unwrap the string. 3 hours earlier, Clara had sat in her car 2 blocks from Aunt Helena's house, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm her breathing. The gift was on the passenger seat. Small, innocuous, devastating. She'd almost turned around 4 times during the drive. Almost convinced herself this was too cruel, too destructive, too final. But then she'd remembered. She remembered being 7 years old, asking Aunt Helena why her daddy didn't come to visit. And Aunt Helena crouching down with fake sympathy in her eyes saying, "Because he doesn't love you enough, sweetheart." "But we do. Aren't you lucky you have us?" She remembered being 13, finding an old photograph of her parents on their wedding day, her father's arm around her mother's waist, both of them smiling, and asking her mother, was he always bad? And her mother snatching the photo away, her face twisted with something between guilt and rage. "Don't romanticize him, Clara. He was selfish." End of story. She remembered being 23, bringing a boyfriend to Thanksgiving dinner, watching her family subtly and not so subtly undermine her. "Clara's always been a bit needy," Jennifer had said with a laugh. "Good luck." The relationship had ended 2 weeks later. She remembered every corner they'd forced her into, every silence they'd demanded, every piece of herself she'd swallowed to make them comfortable. No, she wouldn't turn around. When she'd finally walked into Aunt Helena's house, the familiar smell had hit her immediately. Pine, cinnamon, expensive candles. The smell of performed perfection. "Clara!" Aunt Helena had air-kissed both her cheeks, a gesture she never did with actual affection. "You made it! We were just saying we weren't sure you'd come." "Why wouldn't I come?" Clara had asked. "Oh, you know, you're always so busy." The word busy delivered with a slight curl of the lip, as if Clara's work at the bookstore was a hobby rather than employment. Uncle Robert had boomed from the living room. "Clara, come get a drink." She'd accepted the glass of cheap wine, of course not the good bottle everyone else was drinking from, and taken her usual position in the corner chair. The chair that was slightly smaller than the others, slightly removed from the main conversation circle, her designated place. Jennifer had arrived 20 minutes later, in a flurry of designer perfume and self-importance, her children trailing behind her like accessories. "Oh, Clara's here," she'd said, as if surprised, though everyone knew Clara always came. The dinner had been as elaborate as always. Aunt Helena prided herself on her culinary performances, duck instead of turkey, truffle risotto, champagne glaze on everything. The presentation was magazine-worthy. Clara's contribution, a simple apple pie she'd made herself, had been placed at the far end of the dessert table, almost hidden behind the professionally catered options. During dinner, the conversation had flowed around Clara like water around a stone. They discussed Jennifer's promotion, Uncle Robert's golf tournament, Tyler's college applications. When someone did address Clara, it was with the kind of performative inclusion that somehow felt worse than exclusion. "And how's the bookstore, Clara?" Aunt Helena had asked during the salad course. "It's good, we're expanding our children's section." "That's nice," Aunt Helena had interrupted, already turning to Jennifer. "Speaking of children, Jennifer, tell everyone about Sophia's piano recital." Erased mid-sentence, a casual cruelty they'd perfected over decades, but Clara had noticed the looks, the whispered conversations, the way Jennifer kept checking her phone and smirking. They were planning something. And then had come the gift exchange, the thrift store clothes, the public humiliation captured on multiple phones, the laughter that was designed to remind Clara that she would never be one of them. Not really. Not ever. Clara had taken it all without breaking, had thanked them with eerie calm, had placed the box at her feet and continued to sit quietly, but inside she'd been counting down, waiting for the exact right moment. Now as she stood in the center of the living room, the gift in her hands, that moment had arrived. The family was arranged around her in a loose circle, Aunt Helena on the main sofa, Uncle Robert beside her, both slightly drunk, Jennifer perched on the arm of a chair, phone in hand, Tyler sprawled on the floor, Clara's mother in the corner looking uncomfortable, as if she sensed something shifting. The Christmas tree lights cast strange shadows. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Clara held the brown paper package, feeling its weight. "What is it?" Jennifer asked, her voice carrying a note of mockery. "Don't tell me you got us all matching bookmarks or something." Light laughter rippled through the room. Clara didn't smile. "It's something I found," she said quietly. "Something I thought you should all see." "Clara," her mother said suddenly, her voice sharp with warning. Maybe what, Mom? Clara looked at her directly. Maybe I shouldn't share it. Maybe some things are better left alone. Her mother's face went pale. Aunt Helena's eyes narrowed. Clara, if this is some kind of... It's not, Clara said. It's just the truth. She began to unwrap the string. The room held its breath. The string fell away first, pooling on the coffee table like a shed skin. Clara's hands were steady now, steadier than they'd been all night. All the nervousness, all the anticipation had crystallized into something else. Clarity. She peeled back the brown paper slowly, methodically, not for drama, but because she wanted them to see every moment of this, wanted them to understand that this wasn't impulsive rage. This was deliberate revelation. Clara, her mother stood up, her voice cracking. Please, the word hung in the air, please, not a request, a prayer. But Clara didn't stop. The first thing she pulled out was the photograph. She held it up so everyone could see. Clara and a man who looked so much like her, it was undeniable. Both of them standing in front of a workshop, tools hanging on the wall behind them, both smiling the same smile. This is Marcus Monteiro, Clara said quietly. My father. This photo was taken 3 weeks ago in Portland, Oregon. The silence in the room was absolute. Jennifer's phone slipped from her hand. Uncle Robert's face lost all its ruddy color. Aunt Helena's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He's alive, Clara continued, her voice steady. He's been alive this entire time. He's a carpenter. He's remarried. He has 2 other children, my half-siblings. Clara? Aunt Helena tried to interrupt. He didn't abandon me, Clara said, cutting her off. Her voice grew stronger. He fought for me. He filed for custody. He wanted to keep me. She pulled out the next document, the custody filing, yellowed with age but perfectly legible. She placed it on the coffee table. In 1990, Marcus Monteiro filed for divorce and full custody. He claimed my mother was struggling with substance abuse. Clara glanced at her mother, whose face was buried in her hands. He had evidence, witness statements, medical records. He was trying to protect me. That's not, Uncle Robert started. It's all here, Clara interrupted, her voice like steel. She pulled out the court transcripts, the evidence, laying them out one by one. The entire case is documented. He fought for me and you... She looked at Aunt Helena. You mobilized the entire family to stop him. Aunt Helena's face had gone from pale to crimson. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Clara pulled out the financial records. Uncle Robert paid for an expensive lawyer. $50,000. I have the check copy right here. She placed it on the table. You brought character witnesses who lied. You painted my father as dangerous, unstable, a threat. He was... Jennifer tried. He wasn't. Clara's voice cracked for the first time. He was a 28-year-old man who loved his daughter and was watching his wife destroy herself. He was trying to help, and you destroyed him for it. She pulled out the witness statements, the coached testimonies, the coordinated attack on her father's character. You won, Clara said quietly. The court ruled in my mother's favor. Marcus was granted supervised visitation only, but he never got to see me, did he? She pulled out another document, the restraining order. Because Aunt Helena filed this, claiming he'd threatened the family. There's no police report, no evidence, just an allegation that was enough to keep him away. Aunt Helena's hands were shaking. He did threaten? No. Clara's voice was absolute. He didn't. But it didn't matter. You had the power, you had the money, you had the connections, and you used all of it to make him disappear. She pulled out the letters, 15 of them, all in their original envelopes, all marked "Return to Sender." He tried to write to me. For years, every birthday, every Christmas, every letter returned unopened. Clara's voice finally broke. He never stopped trying, he never stopped loving me. But you made sure I never knew. She let the letters fall onto the table, a cascade of blocked love, stolen years. Clara, you have to understand. Her mother was sobbing now. Understand what? Clara looked at her. That you were struggling? I do understand that. What I don't understand is why you let them convince you that the solution was to erase my father from existence. We were trying to protect you, Aunt Helena said, her voice desperate now. From what? Clara's laugh was bitter. From love? From stability? From a parent who wanted me? From chaos, Aunt Helena snapped. Your father was chaos. Your mother was barely functional. Someone had to control everything, Clara finished. Someone had to take charge. Someone had to decide what was best for everyone. Aunt Helena's face twisted with something between anger and guilt. Clara pulled out the final item, her handwritten note. She didn't read it aloud, She simply placed it on top of all the evidence, the final piece of the truth. For 35 years, Clara said, her voice quiet now but clear, you made me feel like I was nothing, like I should be grateful for scraps, like I deserved to sit in the corner and be mocked and accept whatever crumbs of attention you threw my way. She looked around at all of them, Aunt Helena, Uncle Robert, Jennifer, even Tyler, who was staring at the documents with wide eyes. I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought I was unlovable. Because if even my own father didn't want me, how could anyone? Clara, Jennifer whispered. But he did want me, Clara said. He never stopped wanting me. You just made sure I never knew. The documents lay spread across the coffee table, like evidence in a trial. Irrefutable, damning, complete. You did this because it was easier than dealing with the mess, because maintaining control was more important than my well-being, because your reputation, your comfortable lies, your perfect family image was worth more than my relationship with my father. Aunt Helena was crying now, mascara running down her face. We thought we were doing the right thing. No, Clara said simply. You thought you were doing the comfortable thing. There's a difference. She looked at all of them one last time. This is the last Christmas I'll spend pretending. The last time I'll sit in the corner. The last time I'll accept being treated like I'm less than human. Where are you going? Her mother asked desperately. Clara was already walking toward the door, leaving all the evidence behind. Let them stare at it. Let them sit with what they'd done. I'm going to spend Christmas with my father, she said. The one who actually wanted me. The door closed behind her with quiet finality. And inside, in the wreckage of their Christmas celebration, the family sat in silence, surrounded by the truth they could no longer deny. The silence in Aunt Helena's living room lasted exactly 47 seconds. Clara knew because she stood on the front porch, in the cold December air, and counted. She could see them through the window, frozen like figures in a snow globe, staring at the documents spread across the coffee table. 47 seconds before the first voice broke through. It was Jennifer. Is this real? Clara didn't wait to hear the answer. She walked to her car, started the engine, and drove away from that house for the last time. But she knew what happened next, because she understood these people, understood how they functioned, how they protected themselves, how they would try to reconstruct their shattered narrative. Inside, Aunt Helena was the first to recover her composure. She grabbed the documents with shaking hands, reading frantically. She doesn't understand the full context. What context? Uncle Robert's voice was hollow. Helena, we paid to keep him away. I signed that check. It's right there. We were protecting Clara, Aunt Helena insisted. But her voice lacked conviction. Her father was unstable. Was he? Jennifer picked up one of the returned letters, reading it. Because this doesn't sound unstable. This sounds heartbroken. You don't remember, Aunt Helena snapped. You were just a child. You don't know what Marcus was really like. Neither do I, Clara's mother said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was still crying, her face blotchy and red. I don't remember anymore what was real, and what you convinced me was real. Sarah, Aunt Helena's voice carried a warning. But Sarah wasn't finished. You told me he was dangerous. You told me he'd take Clara away and I'd never see her again. You told me the only way to keep my daughter was to cut him out completely. We were right, Aunt Helena said desperately. Look how well she's done. She's fine. She's sitting in the corner every Christmas. Tyler spoke up for the first time, his teenage voice cutting through the adult rationalizations. Being given garbage clothes as a joke? Being treated like she's some kind of charity case? He looked at his grandmother with something close to disgust. That's fine. Tyler, you don't understand. I understand that you humiliate her every year and we all just laugh along, Tyler said. He grabbed his coat. I'm leaving. Where are you going? Jennifer demanded. Anywhere that's not here. He left, the door slamming behind him. Uncle Robert was reading the financial records, his face ashen. If this gets out, he muttered. If anyone sees that I paid to, that we coordinated to, it won't get out, Aunt Helena said sharply. Clara wouldn't. Are you insane? Jennifer turned on her aunt. She just laid this all out in front of us on Christmas. You think she won't tell people? She's emotional right now. She'll calm down. She'll realize that airing family business publicly would hurt her as much as... Would it? Sarah looked up at her sister. Helena, what exactly do you think Clara has to lose now? We already treat her like garbage. We already made her feel worthless. What are we going to do, exclude her from family events? She laughed bitterly. That might actually be a relief to her. Aunt Helena's face crumpled. The mask of control she'd worn for decades finally cracking. I was trying to hold this family together. By lying. Jennifer's voice was sharp. By stealing someone's father from them. Marcus was going to destroy everything, Aunt Helena said, her voice rising. He was going to take Clara, drag Sarah through court, air all our dirty laundry. Our dirty laundry. Sarah stood up, her whole body shaking. What dirty laundry, Helena? What were you so desperate to hide? The room went quiet. Helena? Uncle Robert's voice was cold now. What is she talking about? Aunt Helena's mouth opened and closed, and in that moment, Clara's revelation uncovered another layer. There was more. Something deeper. You were using drugs, Aunt Helena finally said, looking at Sarah. You were stealing from Mom and Dad to pay for them. You were barely taking care of Clara. If Marcus had gotten custody, if it had all come out in court, our family's reputation would have been damaged, Uncle Robert finished, understanding dawning in his voice. That's what this was really about? Not protecting Clara or Sarah, but protecting the family name. They're the same thing, Aunt Helena insisted. They're really not, Jennifer said quietly. The arguing continued, voices rising and falling, accusations and justifications blending together. But the foundation had cracked. Each person was beginning to see their own complicity, their own guilt. Sarah saw how she'd let her sister's fear override her own judgment, how she'd accepted the narrative that keeping her daughter meant destroying her daughter's father. Uncle Robert saw how he'd used his money to buy a specific outcome without questioning whether it was right. Jennifer saw how she'd participated in years of casual cruelty, convincing herself it was just family dynamics, just jokes, nothing serious. And Aunt Helena saw that her need for control had cost her niece a father, had cost her family the truth, had cost everyone decades of authentic relationship. But seeing and accepting are different things. We can fix this, Aunt Helena said, trying to rally. We'll call Clara, we'll explain. Explain what? Sarah asked. How do you explain 35 years of lies? We'll apologize. She doesn't want apologies, Jennifer said, reading Clara's note. She says it right here. She's not asking for anything. She's just done. Done. The finality of that word settled over the room. They'd lost her. Not because she'd moved away or grown apart, but because they'd systematically destroyed her trust, her sense of self-worth, her family structure. And now that she knew the truth, there was no going back. The Christmas tree lights blinked cheerfully, oblivious to the destruction around them. The expensive gifts lay forgotten. The elaborate meal sat half-eaten in the dining room, and the documents remained spread across the coffee table, evidence of their collective failure. One by one they left. Uncle Robert first, too ashamed to look at anyone. Jennifer next, gathering her children, her own tears surprising her. Tyler had already gone, until it was just Aunt Helena and Sarah in the living room, surrounded by the ruins of their Christmas, their family, their lies. I thought I was protecting everyone, Aunt Helena whispered. Sarah didn't answer. She was looking at the photograph of Clara and Marcus, at their matching smiles, at the obvious love between them. You were protecting yourself, Sarah finally said. We all were. She picked up her coat and left her sister alone. In her car, Clara was already 30 miles away, driving through the snowy night toward Portland, Oregon, toward her father's house, toward the Christmas she'd been denied for 35 years. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Texts from her mother, from Jennifer, even one from Tyler. She didn't read them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The silence in her car wasn't empty. It was full of peace. She'd done it. She'd spoken her truth. She'd refused to carry their shame anymore. And she was free. The drive to Portland took 6 hours through the snow. Clara drove carefully, her hands steady on the wheel, Christmas music playing softly from the radio, songs about coming home. She'd called her father from the car. I'm coming, she'd said simply. I told them. I showed them everything. There'd been a long pause on the other end. Then, how do you feel? Free, Clara had answered. And she'd meant it. Marcus's house was a small craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood. Through the window, Clara could see Christmas lights and a modest tree. When she pulled into the driveway, the front door opened immediately. Her father stood in the doorway, still wearing his work shirt, flour on his hands from baking. Behind him, she could see his wife, Patricia, and her half-siblings, a teenage girl and a younger boy. Clara got out of the car, and Marcus met her halfway down the driveway. They didn't speak. They just held each other, both crying, making up for 35 years of stolen hugs. I'm so sorry, Marcus kept saying. I'm so sorry I stopped fighting. I understand why you did, Clara said. I would have done the same thing. Inside, Patricia had set an extra place at the table without asking, as if she'd known Clara would come. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine and fresh bread, simpler than Aunt Helena's elaborate display, but warmer, real. Clara's half-sister, Emma, looked at her shyly. "Dad talks about you all the time." "He does. Every Christmas," the younger boy, Jack, added. "He always says he wishes you were here." Clara felt tears threaten again. "I wish I'd been here too." They stayed up late that night talking, not about the confrontation. That could wait. Instead, they shared stories. Marcus told Clara about her grandparents on his side, people she'd never known existed. He showed her photos of himself at her age. He shared memories of when Clara was a baby, before everything fell apart. "You used to laugh at everything," he said, smiling. "Everything was hilarious to you. Dropping a spoon, hilarious. Someone sneezing, comedy gold." "What happened to that kid?" Clara asked. "She learned to be quiet," Marcus said sadly. "But maybe she can remember how to laugh again." As midnight approached, they all gathered around the modest Christmas tree. Marcus handed Clara a wrapped package. "I know it's not Christmas morning yet," he said, "but I've been waiting 35 years to give you a Christmas present. I don't want to wait anymore." Inside was a handmade wooden box, beautifully crafted, and inside that were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Clara, all unsent. "Every year," Marcus explained. "Every birthday, every Christmas, every major life event. I wrote to you even though I couldn't send them. I wanted you to know you were always in my thoughts." Clara opened one randomly. It was dated June 15th, 2002, her 16th birthday. "Dear Clara, you're 16 today. I wonder if you're learning to drive. I wonder if you're dating anyone, if you're happy, if you still have that laugh you had as a baby. I saw a girl at the grocery store today who looked about your age. Dark hair like yours. I caught myself staring, wondering if somehow it might be you. It wasn't, of course, but I want you to know that wherever you are, whoever you've become, I love you. I've always loved you. And if you ever find these letters, I hope you'll know that not a single day passed that I didn't think of you. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Love, Dad." Clara read through more of them, tears streaming down her face. Each letter was a piece of the relationship they'd been denied. Each one was proof that she'd never been abandoned, never been unwanted, never been unloved. She'd just been stolen. "Thank you," she whispered, holding the box to her chest. "Thank you for never giving up on me." "I could never give up on you," Marcus said. "You're my daughter." That night, Clara slept in the guest room that Patricia had prepared. Simple but comfortable, with fresh sheets and a lamp that gave off warm light. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't elaborate, but it was offered with love, not obligation. And for the first time in her life, Clara felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Back in her hometown, the aftermath of Clara's revelation continued to unfold. Sarah had gone home to her small apartment and spent the night looking through old photos, trying to separate memory from manipulation. She found pictures of Marcus she'd forgotten she had. Him holding newborn Clara, him teaching toddler Clara to walk, him laughing at something off camera. He didn't look dangerous in these photos. He looked young, overwhelmed, but deeply in love with his daughter. Had she really believed he was a threat? Or had she just let Helena convince her it was easier to believe that than to fight? Jennifer couldn't sleep either. She kept thinking about years of Christmas dinners, years of subtle and not so subtle cruelty toward Clara. She'd participated, she'd laughed, she'd posted that humiliating video to social media. At 2 a.m., she deleted the video and texted Clara, "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." Aunt Helena sat alone in her spotless living room, surrounded by the evidence of what she'd done. Part of her still wanted to justify it, to reconstruct a narrative where she'd been protecting everyone, but the documents didn't lie. The letters didn't lie. The 35 years of Clara sitting in the corner didn't lie. She'd traded her niece's happiness for control, and now both were gone. Uncle Robert told his wife that night that he thought they should sell the business, move somewhere else, start over. "Everyone's going to know," he said. "When this gets out, maybe we deserve for people to know," his wife replied quietly. Tyler posted something on social media before bed. "Sometimes the people who seem like they have it all together are the ones breaking everyone else. Pay attention to who's sitting in the corner." It got 47,000 shares by morning. Christmas morning arrived quiet and cold. Clara woke up in her father's house to the smell of coffee and pancakes. Emma and Jack were already up, excitedly opening presents. Marcus and Patricia were curled up on the couch, watching them with obvious contentment. "Merry Christmas," Patricia said, handing Clara a mug of coffee. "How do you feel?" Clara thought about it. "Like I've been holding my breath for 35 years, and finally exhaled." They had a small breakfast, nothing elaborate. No performance, no one trying to impress anyone else. Just a family sharing a meal. Later, Marcus took Clara to his workshop, the one from the photograph. He showed her the pieces he was working on, explained his process, let her try some basic techniques. "You're good at this," he said, watching her sand a piece of wood. "You have the patience for it." "I learned patience," Clara said. "It was a survival skill." "Well, now you can use it for creation instead of survival." Clara looked at her father, really looked at him. He had grey hair now, lines around his eyes. They'd missed so much time, but they had time now. Time to build something new. "I want you to know," Clara said carefully, "I'm not expecting you to fix anything. I'm not looking for you to make up for lost time or be a perfect father or—" "Clara," Marcus put down his tools, "I know I can't give you back those 35 years. I can't undo what they did or what I failed to prevent. But I can give you today and tomorrow, and every day after that, if you'll let me." "I'd like that," Clara whispered. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, and Clara realized something profound. Silence with her father felt completely different than silence with her mother's family. That silence had been suppression, erasure, disappearing. This silence was peace, presence, being. She'd spent so long believing she needed to earn love, to be grateful for scraps, to accept whatever treatment came her way. But love wasn't supposed to be earned. It was supposed to be given freely. And finally, after 35 years, someone was giving it to her. 3 months later, Clara stood in a different living room, her own. She'd moved to Portland, not to live with Marcus. That wasn't what either of them needed, but to be near him, to build a relationship without the pressure of lost time hanging over them. The apartment was small but hers. She'd gotten a job at a local bookstore, one that paid better than her old one. She'd started therapy with a new counselor. She'd joined a pottery class just because she wanted to. She was learning to take up space. Her phone still got messages from her mother's family. Sarah texted every few days. Apologies, explanations, please. Clara hadn't blocked her, but she hadn't responded either. She needed time to figure out if there was a relationship there worth salvaging. Jennifer had sent a long email, detailing her own reckoning with the family dynamics. "I'm seeing a therapist too," she'd written, "trying to understand how I became someone who thought cruelty was funny. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see it now." Clara had written back, "I'm glad you're getting help. Maybe someday we can talk." Aunt Helena had tried calling once, but Clara had let it go to voicemail. She'd listened to the message. "Clara, please, we need to talk about this like adults. You're tearing this family apart." Clara had deleted it. She wasn't tearing anything apart. She'd simply removed herself from a structure that had been built on lies. Uncle Robert had sent money, a substantial check with a note that said, "I know this doesn't fix anything." Clara had donated it to a charity for children in foster care. She didn't need his guilt money. She needed nothing from him. Tyler had reached out on Instagram. They'd actually built a small friendship. He was applying to colleges far from home, talking about setting boundaries with his mother and grandmother. "You showed me it's possible to walk away," he'd written. "Thank you for that." But the most surprising contact came from her mother. Sarah had shown up at Clara's apartment unannounced, looking smaller and older than Clara remembered. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Sarah had said immediately. "I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know, and I'm leaving Helena's sphere. I'm getting my own place. I'm trying to figure out who I am without her telling me." "That's good," Clara had said carefully. "I also," Sarah's voice cracked, "I found more photos. Have you and your father. I'd hidden them away, convinced myself it was better if they were gone, but I'm giving them to you now." She'd handed Clara an envelope. Inside were dozens of pictures. Clara as a baby in Marcus's arms. Clara taking her first steps while Marcus cheered. Clara and Marcus building a sandcastle. A whole life Clara had been told didn't exist. "Why now?" Clara had asked. "Because Helena said something at Christmas, after you left. She said, if this gets out, everyone will know what we did. And I realized I'd spent 35 years more concerned with what people would know than with what I'd done to my daughter." Sarah had left after that, not pushing for more, but she'd left the door open. And Clara appreciated that, the absence of demands, the respect for Clara's need for space. Now, on a sunny March afternoon, Clara was hosting her first dinner party. Nothing elaborate. Just Marcus and Patricia, Emma and Jack and Dr. Chen, who'd become more friend than therapist. She'd made lasagna, which wasn't perfect, but was made with effort and love. The table was mismatched chairs from thrift stores. The plates didn't all coordinate, but it was hers. To new beginnings, Marcus said, raising his glass. They all toasted. And to speaking truth, Patricia added. Another toast. Can I say something? Emma asked. Clara nodded. I'm really glad you're here. I always knew I had a sister somewhere, but I thought I'd never meet you. So this is like, I get to have something I thought was impossible. Clara felt tears threaten. I feel the same way. After dinner, as they all sat around talking, Dr. Chen pulled Clara aside. How are you really doing? She asked. Clara thought about it. I'm angry sometimes. I'm sad about all the lost time. But I'm also hopeful. Is that weird? Not at all. You're grieving what you lost while celebrating what you found. Both can be true. I keep thinking about that Christmas, Clara said, about placing that gift on the table. I was so scared, but it was the most powerful thing I've ever done. You took back your narrative, Dr. Chen said. You refused to let them define you anymore. I didn't do it perfectly, though. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, if I should have. Clara, Dr. Chen's voice was firm but kind. You spent 35 years being too soft, too accommodating, too willing to shrink yourself. One moment of being too harsh by their standards. That's not cruelty, that's balance. Clara nodded, letting the words sink in. That night, after everyone had left, Clara stood in her apartment alone. She looked at the photos on her wall, new ones with Marcus, Emma and Jack, pictures from pottery class, a selfie with co-workers who actually liked her. She looked at the wooden box Marcus had given her, full of letters she was slowly working through. She looked at herself in the mirror, the same face but different somehow, more solid, more present. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. No pressure to respond. I just wanted to say I love you. I'm sorry I spent so long not showing it. Clara stared at the text for a long time. Then she typed back, thank you. I'm not ready yet, but maybe someday. It was honest. It was clear. It was enough. She put her phone down and made herself tea. Sat on her second-hand couch with a book she'd been meaning to read. And for the first time in her entire life, Clara Monteiro felt no guilt about taking up space, no anxiety about whether she belonged, no shame about simply existing. She'd spent decades learning to be invisible. Now she was learning to be seen. And that, she realized, was the real gift she'd given herself that Christmas. Not revenge, not punishment, not even justice, but permission. Permission to stop apologizing for existing. Permission to stop accepting crumbs when she deserved the whole meal. Permission to walk away from people who made her feel small. Permission to build a life on truth instead of lies. The Christmas they'd planned, her humiliation, had become the Christmas she'd freed herself. And every day since was a day she chose herself. Sometimes the most powerful word we can learn is no. No, I won't accept this treatment. No, I won't carry your shame. No, I won't pretend anymore. And sometimes the most powerful action is simply placing the truth on the table and walking away. Because you don't need people to accept your truth. You just need to stop accepting their lies. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever sat in the corner, if you've ever been made to feel small, if you've ever been told you should be grateful for scraps, remember, you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your smallness. You don't owe anyone your life. Clara's story is her own, but maybe it's also yours. And maybe it's time to put your truth on the table.